am Dr. Jason Sanderson. I'm an assistant director in the Office of Global Education, and I am the regional advisor for Germany, Austria, as well as the Netherlands. And we're joined today by Helga Kauhofer, who is our local coordinator in Vienna, Austria. So what we're going to do in this presentation is go over some of the basics about the programs. The idea is to give you a sense of what are the programs that exist. We're not going to go into too much detail unless you have specific questions that you would like to ask. You're able to do that at any point through the Q&A field. So you can do that at any point. Whenever you have a question, feel free to ask. And we'll then also have a full Q&A portion at the end. So what we want to make sure we go over is, where are the programs? What are the options that are out there? And we have programs in many cities. So as you can see, we have a program in Berlin, a program in Munich, a program in Freiburg, Tubingen, Trier, Vienna, and also Amsterdam. The Berlin, Munich, and Freiburg programs, I tend to go over together just because they're similar in structure. They're a little bit different in how they actually interact with their local institution, but they're fairly similar in structure in that they have a component that is intended purely for American university students. And so that means that you have access to language classes, access to tutorials and that sort of thing for students who may not feel overly comfortable just quite yet with their German. They also do offer options to take classes at the universities. The local universities would give all sorts of different subject offerings from the German language and teaching to literature, to history, political science, but also broader things like physics and business and also biology. We've had students do in the past as well. So it really does depend where your interests fall. The important difference to note about the different programs is that you do see in the parentheses when they are offered. That's an important distinction to note. So if you see just in parentheses spring and full year, that means that that program is not available in the fall. And that is because of the one notable difference between the German-speaking countries and the United States, namely the calendar differences in when the university year starts. Traditionally, the university year in Germany and Austria does not start until well after ours does, which means that the fall is not typically an option because their fall goes into our spring. So it can't be a standalone option. You'll notice that for Berlin and Freiburg, however, there is no distinction there. That means that there are fall options there. Those two programs, however, are going to have, when it comes to the fall options, those are going to be just for program participants, meaning just other American university students, not just Georgetown students, not just American students either, but students coming from American universities. So that is one major difference to note. And because of that, those programs also do allow for a slightly lower language level. So throughout these options that you see here, until we get to Amsterdam, all of them do require a certain level of German. The Berlin and Freiburg programs, when it comes to doing just the courses for foreigners, so meaning not looking to go into the university, it is expected that you've completed through the intermediate level. So that either means intermediate 2 or intensive intermediate. If you're looking to do direct matriculation in any of the programs, so that would be Berlin, Munich, Freiburg, Tubingen, or Vienna, that would require that you have at least intensive advanced or advanced 2, but the preference is that students have text and context. The differences then are also going to be then looking at just the size of the cities. So we'll look at some pictures in a moment so you can just get a little bit of a sense of what those cities look like. The other thing you might want to notice here is that there's the Georgetown Inn program in Trier. When you see Georgetown Inn in most programs, that means the program will be a program that has a Georgetown faculty member teaching on it for the most part, and that's going to be a summer program. So that obviously has a slightly different set of expectations. It's language intensive, and they can accommodate different levels. Finally, where we're looking at this list, we do have the University of Vienna, which is where Helga advises our students, but we also have a Vienna music program. Those two programs are very different. The Vienna music program is sort of a hybrid. between what we've talked about briefly for Berlin and Freiburg, meaning that there are classes taught just for foreign students, but with the opportunity to take classes at the university, but always keeping in mind that the focus is music, because Vienna is a wonderful city to study music and to perform music. The program actually has its own performance hall, which is pretty impressive. And it's existed now for over 25 years. So it's a very unique opportunity for students of music, whether that you be major or minor. It does give you opportunities for playing instruments as well as for vocal. And then finally, we do have the Amsterdam program. The Amsterdam program is quite different. The Amsterdam program has been included here because it's part of the Germanic-speaking portion of Europe, but it's quite different in its scope and how it functions. What you're going to find is that the Amsterdam program is one that's highly structured, meaning that it already has a predetermined course load. Students do not get to choose any of their courses on that program. That is our School for International Training, SIT, our partner. They have these programs that are very specific in theme. So by choosing the program, you've chosen the theme and you know exactly what the courses will be. This program is rather unique. As you see, it does talk about sexuality and gender. That does not mean that students necessarily need to be women's studies or gender studies students at Georgetown. We've had students from multiple majors go on that program, but students do need to have a demonstrated interest in the subject. And what is different beyond the fact that the course load is predetermined before you go is that the last month of the program is going to be a self-guided, self-directed research project. So the beginning portion of the semester is actually something that you are working towards that goal of conducting your own independent study project based on the theme of sexuality and gender, and however you wish to explore that while you're there. So now I'd like to just show you, talk a little bit about the requirements before showing you where these cities are actually located. When it comes to the requirements, overall, students are going to have a 3.0 cumulative GPA for a semester program and a 2.7 GPA for the summer program. That is going to be going into your application. So it's important that, for instance, if you're a transfer student and you don't yet have a GPA for Georgetown, that you keep that in mind, that a final decision, for instance, would not be able to be given until we actually saw a Georgetown GPA. When it comes to language requirements, as I mentioned earlier, for the German and Austrian programs, they all do have some expected prerequisite level for the language study. Now, that does not mean necessarily that you have to have taken those classes at Georgetown. That is one major difference, because sometimes students will ask, well, you know, I tested into this level, or I took AP, or I did this, or I did that. As long as you can attest that you have the appropriate level through the placement exam for the department, meaning that you've tested beyond the requisite level, then you would be perfectly fine. However, it is important that you would take that before you would be starting your application, because if you do need a little bit of remedial language support, that you have the opportunity and the time to do that. For the Netherlands, because we do not teach Dutch, there is no Dutch required. However, students are required to take Dutch while on the program. For passports and visas, those are going to vary by department and by program and by country as to what you need to have ahead of time, how long things need to be done in advance. But generally speaking, you are going to need a passport and you are going to need some sort of permit, whether it be an actual visa or a study permit. You're going to have to apply for something in advance. If you have any questions about that, particularly if you have a specific concern about renewing your passport, or you happen to have two citizenships or something like that, that is something you can always discuss with me as the advisor for this region, or if you are also looking at other programs in other regions, that advisor as well. And we can try to advise you what's the best way to approach your unique situation when it comes to that. So here we just have some beautiful pictures of the cities where we have programs. So as you'll recall, the Berlin program is one of those programs that can accommodate a slightly lower level, because they can accommodate students who are not taking classes at the university. So students who are able to take classes just with other international students, again, still taught in German, but giving students more options to be able to do things. There are options there that would range from German and European integration, to multiculturalism in Germany, German language, business German, all sorts of different opportunities, including sometimes internship options, depending which semester you would go. Munich, as I mentioned, is similar in structure, except that there is not a fall option. So that means that students do have the option to take classes with the local university students or with their other co-participants on the program. Students can choose which is best for them, the degree to which they want to test themselves when it comes to their German integration. This program, the unique thing about the program in Munich is that it is the longest serving American study abroad program based in Germany. They have been active now for over 60 years, and uniquely they actually are a voting member of the university body, which is also a very unique thing, again, when it comes to study abroad programs. Freiburg, as you can see, is a slightly smaller city. That's for students who are more interested in, we'll call it a more traditional perhaps, or a less cosmopolitan area. It's right on the edge of the Black Forest. So for students who are interested in either in ecology or perhaps going out and hiking on a regular basis, that is something that students take quite often when they are in Freiburg, because it is literally right outside the city gates. And they actually do still have the city gates from the medieval times. You do have the Black Forest at your feet. They do also, like Berlin, have a fall option for students who are interested in doing something in the fall and are not able for one reason or another to go in the spring. And that option does give students to do, allow to do things with local students later on, either for the full year or for the spring semester. Tubingen is the quintessential German student town. It's not far from Tubingen, not far from Freiburg, still in Baden-Württemberg in the southwest of the country. And it's known for being the student city of the country. You can see that they also are known in that the upper left-hand picture, they're also known for gondolas, because they actually do have a gondola tradition where people like to go up and down the major river in the city. And that's something that all the students do during orientation. It's something they find very, very interesting. Trier is where we have the summer program, which I mentioned, and you can actually see that one picture. That would be what is called Porta Nigra. That is actually a Roman ruin. It is one of the oldest cities that still have, in the German-speaking world, that still has remnants of the Roman occupation. So as you can tell, the people in Trier have roots that go back quite a long time. And it likes to claim fame to one of the more popular Christmas markets in the winter season. And then this brings us to, of course, Vienna. Vienna is very different. Of course, it is very important to remember that Vienna is not part of Germany. It's a German-speaking part of Europe. However, it is the capital of Austria. But what I often like to tell students, and Helga can elaborate on this in a moment, is that if you've heard about Multikulti in your German classes, and this is something that you often hear associated with Berlin, for instance, that is something that has come to be perhaps in the last 50 or 60 years in Berlin. Whereas in Vienna, I'd like to say, Vienna is the original Multikulti. Vienna has been the crossroads from the East and West for centuries, and where you have the meeting of the Eastern and the Western, and you have, it was also, of course, the capital of the Habsburg Empire, so that's also very important, the Austro-Hungarian Empire later on. And so this is something that, you can see obviously in this very empirical and very impressive architecture you see in these pictures that just speaks to its history and the fact that this has been a very important city for quite some time. And so I think on that, I might turn it over to Helga to talk a little bit about what students do while they are there and what kind of activities are available locally. And if any students have any questions, then we can get to those in a moment.
Okay, so what can I tell you about Vienna? The University of Vienna is the oldest university in the German-speaking world. It offers around 180 studies that you can choose of. It's a very big university, so we have around 88,000 students. And it's of course very different, and it's very different studying than it is in Washington. What students like to do here, of course, Vienna is the city of music, so there are very many students coming for going to concerts, also playing their instruments here, taking part in a choir or in an orchestra. Yeah, there's very many things to offer, and we have a little cultural program that I do with students. So we are going to the opera, to the theater. We are visiting Schönbrunn, which you can see on the picture on the very top. Yeah, please feel free to ask me any questions you like.
And one of the things I know that students often share that Helga will do with them when they're shortly arrived after they get there is to introduce them to some Austrian cuisine, some typical Wiener Schnitzel and some Apfelstrudel. So you get to see up close in person not only how do you eat it, but also how you make it, because that's a very important thing to be able to come back with some tangible skills outside of the classroom as well. So one of the things that we know that students often wonder about is how do finances work when it comes to study abroad? So the important thing to keep in mind when it comes to the finances is that there's tuition and then there are other fees associated and other expenses. So it's important to keep those two separated when you're considering the different expenses that you will need to make arrangements for. When it comes to the fixed expenses, those are going to be ones that are actually billed to your account. Those are going to be Georgetown tuition, for instance, and health insurance. And in some cases also housing when it comes to the local housing costs. However, the other things that you need to keep in mind are the estimated expenses. And those are ones that can vary quite a bit. And so those are going to depend a bit on your budget, but also perhaps what your plans are and what you want to be doing in your free time while you are there. So that can include your airfare, perhaps different options for room and board, your personal expenses. So that would include, your budget for doing things during the week while, if you're going to a cafe and, having a piece of some wonderful torte or something like that with a Viennese coffee or something like that. Or if you're looking to participate, for instance, in perhaps an extramural activity, or if you want to go away for a weekend. Those different types of things, you're going to want to keep in mind how often you may want to do that. And we do have estimates on that on our website. But those things do vary depending on what your expectations are and how often you want to participate in those things. When it comes to programs for the summer, the tuition and fees do vary by program. So if you're looking at the TRIA program, but perhaps also considering a different program, do keep in mind that each program is quite different when it comes to the tuition and fees and what those cover. So do make sure that you read through on the individual pages on our website what is actually part of those fees. When it comes to financial aid is completely portable for the semester program. So that means if you're going for a single semester or 2 semesters for a full year, your aid package is completely transportable with you. And if it turns out that the program you are going on has a higher cost of attendance, perhaps because of the travel component to get there or something else, your aid package will change based on the need that you have for that individual program. For the TRIA program and other summer programs, it is based individually on the program what resources are available. For the TRIA program, there are resources available through the Georgetown German department, but other programs also have other external sources. So you want to make sure that you're looking on the individual pages so that you know exactly what additional sources there may be. As I mentioned, we do have budgets available, and those are going to be available on each one of the program pages. So all the programs that we've just reviewed, each of them has their own page, and within that page, you're going to have different tabs that you're going to see different items about student life, about academics, but also about finances, including the budget. So if you want to see what we estimate for things beyond the tuition for an individual program, that's where you'll be able to look into that. And when it comes to scholarships, those are going to be location specific, and it is very important that you keep in mind what different timelines may exist for any external scholarships. So if you are looking at external funding sources, you want to make sure that you understand what the timelines are for those and how that may impact your Georgetown award already. So if you haven't already spoken to your financial aid counselor about your plans to study abroad, once the semester gets underway, that would be a good thing to do so you understand just exactly how that will work for your specific case. If you have any questions that we're not able to answer today or that you think of later on, you can always visit our website. So that's going to be studyabroad.georgetown.edu. And that's where you'll be able to find the program brochures and what we call My GEO Abroad. You can always attend a Study Abroad 101 session. Those are going to be obviously held virtually this semester. Meet with an advisor like myself to talk about the program, talk with your academic deans and or your German faculty to get a sense of what suggestions they may have as to how best prepare, what might be the best site that they know of because they may have heard from past students in their classes for your particular interest where they may suggest you go. We have peer advisors and other returnees that you can always speak with. We have student blogs on the Stories Beyond the Hilltop that you can look at on our website. And of course, there's always social media that you can look into as far as what else is going on. So on that, I'd like to open it up officially for any questions, if anyone has any questions. So the one question we have here is, I really want to get good at German. What program should I do? Now, that's a very loaded question because of course Helga's gonna say Vienna, but honestly, it really depends on what your level already is, what your aspirations are, how do you want to use your German, and how much time do you have? If you don't have, because of the sequencing of your major, for instance, a lot of time and you're not able, for instance, to go for a full semester, the summer program is a very good introduction to a very intensive language study that can accommodate truly any level. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can start there. We often find that students go to the TRIA program and get their appetites whetted to go somewhere else, and they come back and say, now I want to go somewhere else. I want to go to Vienna, I want to go to Berlin, I want to go to Munich. And so it's a great way of getting exposure. Even if you're not too sure that you want to do that later on, it gives you that good first experience. If you have more time, obviously a semester gives you a lot broader exposure, and it's going to depend on honestly what types of classes you need, but also what you like. What kind of setting do you like? So if you need, for instance, very specific classes because you're doing a double major and a certificate, you may find that those programs that I mentioned earlier that have the fall options where you can take all of your classes with the international students, they may not offer all the subjects that you need because those are going to be primarily the most commonly sought after subjects like history and literature and cultural studies and language and political science and that sort of thing. If you need hard sciences, they're not going to be teaching that. That's something you're going to have to go to a full university program to be able to do. If you're looking to do something that combines options, that's something you also want to consider. Different faculties in the different universities may have different schedules sometimes. In the German universities, it's not as much the case in Austria, but in the German universities, sometimes they're more autonomous. And so that might make it a little bit more difficult for you to cross-register. So those are things that you want to, think about. And obviously, we can talk about that one-on-one. If you have questions, you can make an appointment to come in and see me. The best option always is to go for the longest time you possibly can. If you can go for a full year, it is night and day the differences that we see when students come back for those who have gone for a single semester and those who have gone for a full year. And the one thing I always tell students, because I myself only went the first time abroad, I only went for a single semester, just when it's time for you to leave is when you're starting to get your bearings and starting to understand things. So if you stay beyond that, that's when you truly are able to appreciate the cultural differences and truly really get into the linguistics and understand what the locals are actually saying around you all the time. You're like, wait a minute, now I don't have to think about it. I actually understand it without thinking about it. So it's that second semester where you make the huge progress. because truly the first 4 months of a time abroad is usually just getting your bearings, because it does take that long, particularly if you're in a city, a large city like Vienna or Berlin or even Munich to some extent. You know, if you're not used to a large city environment, that may take you some longer time to get accustomed to and to get your bearings and trying to figure out which part of the city you actually like and where you want to hang out and which coffee shops you like and those sort of things. So as simple as a question is, which program should I do to get better in German? There's no real 100% answer that's one size fits all. It really does depend on what you're looking to do with the language. If you are looking to use your language within your major, and your major is not one of the, we'll call it traditional subjects, then you definitely have to look at a program that is at least a semester, that gives you that exposure to your actual major field of study, meeting with students, local students who are going to speak the language for your individual subject, because these are going to be things that obviously you would not have been exposed to in your German classes at Georgetown. So they want to make sure that you get exposed to that locally. Another question that's come in is it easy to travel to big cities if I study at a smaller one? And the answer is yes. This is one of the amazing things of Europe. Traveling around, now of course I do have to put a COVID caveat in there, you know, with things that are going on right now, traveling around, particularly across borders, is not necessarily always advisable, but getting around is much simpler than it is here in the US. The train network is much more developed, and beyond that, you also have lots of opportunities to be able to visit different places. And that is going to be something that, you know, perhaps every weekend, if you wanted to, you could go to another nearby city, nearby town and explore, because that's the other wonderful thing, particularly in the fall, but also sometimes in the spring, that there are local festivals that you can explore. What I always like to tell students, and I'm not sure whether Helga has these same experiences or conversations with students, is that you can always go to Prague. You can always go to Rome. You can't always go to this little tiny dorf that's going to have some sort of, you know, fest this weekend that only happens every other year or something like that. Whether it be, you know, a Weinfest or something like that, or something related to a pretzel, the pretzels, or garlic, or whatever the case may be. These are going to be things that you really want to take advantage of. This is what study abroad is really about, honestly, is to explore those things that you can't come back and easily do. And Helga, I'm not sure if you have any, you know, tips as to when it comes to traveling, or what students should focus on when they're traveling, when things that they maybe are sometimes maybe overdone or over talked about?
Well, as you said, it's very cheap and it's very easy to get through all of Europe. Usually, well, I mean, we will see how things will develop during next year. But there are very cheap train tickets, and the distances are not that far. So it will take you, let's say, from Vienna to Venice, for instance, it's 5 hours or 6 hours. This is not really so far. Mm-hmm. So this would be an option.
Yeah, it's amazing what students are able to do. And I know that students often say, you know, where should I go? What should I do? And it really, again, that's going to depend on what your interests are. But what I often tell students is, you know, take advantage of being where you are to explore first and foremost your host country. Really get to know your host country the most you possibly can. Because yes, they may seem small compared to even your home state, but there are going to be a lot of things to see and do that you may not necessarily know about. And then, of course, you can go a couple times to some of the bigger capitals and other cities nearby and what have you. Not to say that those aren't wonderful, but those are things that are much more easily done from afar, that if you want to do that later on, you will always have the opportunity to do that. But take advantage of things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do because you're there, because you're local, because you have perhaps some local friends who are going to do things. Take advantage of those things. Some of the other things that I know that students often wonder about, what about student life? You know, what about clubs? What about sports and those sorts of things? And that's some of the things that I know that students often feel that they will miss if they leave Georgetown. That's because it's such a part of what you do all the time. And of course, you know, this last semester and this semester that has started, you know, we're getting used to seeing how things are done differently than virtually. So that means you may be able to keep up with some of that a little bit virtually once you go abroad. But whenever you're at a university setting, there will be lots of opportunities for local students to interact with them when you have a similar interest, whether that be, whether that be hiking, whether that be, cooking, whether that be Amnesty International, whether that be, I'm trying to think of other things, fencing students have done in the past. And literally the sky is the limit because, as Helga said, some of the university partners we have are huge. 88,000 students. You can imagine that there are going to be a lot of students who share some of your interests. So all you have to do is figure out where to go looking for them, and you'll be able to find the Studentenverein for what you're interested in, and join that. And that's going to get you inroads to part of the university population that otherwise you would not have had. And that's also one of the things that I suggest students do, because a lot of foreign students won't, either because they're too busy with other things, namely traveling or what have you, or, and sometimes it's more this, or they're scared. And I'm not gonna lie, having studied abroad in multiple countries, walking into a group of local students whom you've never met, you've never spoken to, you're just getting there, so you're feeling a little bit wobbly when it comes to your German legs, and you have to introduce yourself and say, I wanna join your group. Yes, that's scary. If you weren't scared for something like that, I would be concerned. But once you get over that initial stage fright, that's where you're gonna make some amazing friends, because you have actually common interests. Because that's the major difference, I would say, between European universities and American universities, is that European universities are not as social. That's not to mean people don't make friends, but classes themselves are not meant to be social. The socializing takes place in smaller groups where you have a shared interest. And since a lot of European students are required to take the classes they are taking, you may be super interested in it, but that does not mean necessarily that they want to talk about that afterward. They want to talk about their interests. So if you have that shared interest, whatever that may be, that's where you're actually going to make those much more solid friendships and relationships. The last thing I would probably talk about before we wrap up is, again, just sort of weighing your options. Where might you want to look? Where's the best option for you? And to see if some of the options are already, some of those decisions are made for you, for instance. So if you know that you have to go abroad in a single semester, and if you know it has to be the fall, well, then that eliminates quite a few programs. However, if you know that you're able to go in the spring, that means that you still have every one of the programs except for the summer program at your disposal. So then you want to think about size of city, what you find comfortable, but also perhaps you want to think about, where might you want to travel locally? If you look at the map of where we have these programs, from Berlin down to Freiburg, those are the two literal opposite extents of the German Republic. You cannot get further away from one another as those two cities. And then if you go to the southeast, then you have to Vienna, and you also have in between those two then Munich. So we have almost the cardinal points covered by the different cities, but they all have their own character. They all have their own ideas as to what's available and what students can and will do while they're there. And also housing options. That's the one major difference I would say as well. For instance, most of the housing options are going to be dorms. There are only a few that have homestays. So if that's something that you want to explore, that's another thing that may help you make your decision a little bit. So if there aren't any other questions, I think that we will be signing off right now. This session has been recorded, and you will be able to find it on our website. So if you do want to go back to it for whatever reason, or if you joined a little bit late and weren't able to cover everything, you will find that on our website in probably about mid-month, so about 2 weeks from now. In the meantime, if you are looking to go abroad immediately, so if you are a junior, please make an appointment with me soon because the deadlines are fast approaching. Otherwise, if you are a first year or a sophomore, the first deadline won't be for the sophomores until February, and that would be then for the fall and full year. So there's plenty of time to look through things. Don't forget to visit our website, which again is studyabroad.georgetown.edu. There you'll be able to find my contact info. If you want to get a hold of Helga for whatever reason to talk about Vienna, I'm happy to put you in touch with her. And I just thank you for joining us today, and please let us know any questions that you may have. Talk to you soon.